I've only had my specialized fuse comp for a couple of weeks, and already I've rounded out my crank bolt. Let's fix it. To start off, you're going to need a drill bit and a drill. I used a 15/64 drill bit because it's just about the same diameter as a T30, but anything around there should work. Now make sure that you're holding onto the crank and drill out the crank bolt. Now take your T30 and start tapping it into the crank bolt with a hammer or a mallet. This is super soft aluminum, so it shouldn't damage your socket at all. Now you should be able to take a ratchet and start spinning the crank bolt out. You want to get the socket pretty far in there so it doesn't just round it out even worse. Now this part isn't necessary, but it's good to do if you want to keep your cranks and bottom bracket lasting just that little bit longer. You can take off your crank arm using a 4mm Allen key and use a rag to wipe down the spindle and the crank arm. Now you can put just a thin layer of grease back on the crank arm and the spindle. This will prevent any creaks and will prevent it from seizing up on there, which is never good. You can also put a bit of grease on your crank bolt just to keep it from seizing up on there and so you can get it a little bit tighter. Now start putting the crank bolt back in, taking care to make sure you're not cross-threading it. To make sure you're getting it tight without over-tightening it, you should get it until it feels snug, and then wiggle your crank around to get any play out of there, and then tighten it just a little bit more. Do this a couple times until there's no more play in the crank arm, and the bolt is pretty snug. Now make sure that you tighten your pinch bolts back up evenly. And with that, you got yourself a brand new crank bolt that is not rounded out, and it's looking fresh too.